Hi, my name is Jazlin Ladriere. I am a senior at Smith College. I am a Latin American Studies major and a Mathematical Sciences minor. And the objective of my presentations is to sort of build a bridge between the two, my major and my minor, and study the history of mathematics in ancient Latin American civilizations, primarily the Mayas, the Incas, and the Aztecs. Okay. All right, and so today I'll be talking about the mathematics in the Inca civilization. First off, I'll tell you a little bit about who the Inca were. They originated in the 12th century. They were situated in the Andes Mountains, stretching all the way from northern part of Ecuador all the way down to central Chile. They're most well known for their artistic and cultural achievements. And as you can see from the picture on the right, they were very artistic even in the framing and the architecture of their land. So this right here is Machu Picchu, and it's one of their terrace agricultural fields. They're also well known for ceremonies, their architecture, their calendar, and their accounting system, which is called the quipu. So here's just a picture to show you the area of the Incas. So as you can see, they stretched very, very, they stretched all the way across the Western Andes. And so a big misconception about this is that they were only in Peru, but truthfully, they go all the way from the top of Ecuador to almost the bottom of Chile. So this is very, very interesting, especially because the Andes are such a the verticality of the Andes is a very hard thing to navigate. And so the fact that they were able to stretch that far along one of the most steep mountain ranges in the world is very impressive. Okay, and this is one of their most well-known sites called Machu Picchu, which is in like 50 kilometers away from Cusco. And we'll be talking about this a little bit more during the presentation. Okay, so to start off, the Incas' counting system were called quipus. The Incas were a civilization that had no written records, so quipus served as one of their main storage devices. This consisted of one horizontal string across the top with many vertically hanging strings. And so each vertical string had knots tied onto them that represented numbers. So kind of like a tally mark. Their number system was positional base 10, and they were read in vertical manner, again, actually the opposite from the Mayas, going from top to bottom. So each each town was assigned a quipucamayok, which was a keeper of the knots, and this person would also sometimes serve as a messenger. So once they were done counting and keeping records of just certain things, they would take their quipus to Cusco, which is the capital of the Incas. So they would kind of use that as reporting their statistics of each town. And so these quipucamayoks were government statisticians, and they kept records of populations, produce, animals, weapons, etc. And also something that was very innovative was that they would use a color key on their quipus. So some strings would be, for example, called the color red, others would be the color blue and green. And so each color would represent a different thing. So let's say red would represent the number of sheep they had, and then blue would represent the number of weapons they had, and so on and so forth. And so here in this image, we see a group of 5 knots, and then a group of 8 knots, and then a group of 6 knots. So the 5 represents the placement of the hundreds, the 8 represents the tens, and the 6 represents the single units. So this would be 586. And here's some more examples of how to count it. And so on the quipus, they just added from left to right. So the knots going from the strings hanging from left to right. And then this is an actual image of what quipus looked like. And as you can see, there are different clusters. So each cluster also meant something different in terms of category, like produce, populations, etc. Okay, so the Incas were one of the most knowledgeable in terms of calendrics. They used their lunisolar calendar for timekeeping. Their lunar cycle was 12 lunar month agricultural cycles, and they studied the waning and waxing of the moon, which was a 14-day period. So the waxing is when the moon gradually gets more and more sunlight, so from new moon to full moon. And as you can see in the picture, the top picture, the waxing phase of the moon, and then the waning phase of the moon is when it goes from full moon to new moon, and so gradually getting darker. And so their solar year also was closely related to their timekeeping and their agricultural cycle. So here they studied the light and shadow aspect of the light and shadow aspect of their agricultural cycles, and then the way that light would fall on a flat surface determined the amount of sunlight a day, so like the hours per day, and then they would also know how impactful the sun would be on their crops. So by studying the shadows of the sun, they were able to tell a lot from that. So this was used to anticipate dates for planting new crops, and also for planning harvest festivals, which was sort of like their religious rituals, where they would pray to their gods for blessings on their land. This was done by a group of experts who studied the way sunlight fell on a wall and flat surfaces. So these experts, so not everybody in the civilization knew how to tell time or like how to read the sun, and so they were assigned jobs in their villages for these types of things. And so from their lunar and solar calendars, they were able to intricately plan out their agricultural cycles. So based on their observations from the sun and the moon, they determined the placement of a city, which also determined the suitability for agriculture and cultivation. So since we know that the Incas were way up in the Andes and that the mountain ranges are very steep, they began adapting new techniques on how to farm on that land because it was very difficult. And so this adaptive technique that they came up with was hill terracing. And so it was a way to sort of maximize their land by carving layers into the soil, into the mountain range. And this allowed for better control of water runoff and soil erosion. And also it maximized the moisture of the soil. So somehow they knew that by terracing the hills, they would kind of conserve the moisture in the air, even though they were way up in the Andes. So they were able to grow a wide range of crops just based off of their moisture levels in the terracing. This was also highly related to their religion. So most of the ceremonies were to pray for fertility and abundance. And their ceremonies and rituals also were associated with their lunar calendar. Okay. And the Incas had 3 different types of architecture. So they had civil architecture, which is the 12-angled stone. The military architecture which is called Sacsayhuaman. The religious architecture, which is Coricancha. And these architectural buildings were made of very large stones, mostly cubic or in a trapezoidal shape. And so on the right, we can sort of see the ways in which they would carve their stones, starting off with really heavy stones at the bottom, very big ones, and gradually getting smaller towards the top. This was a very innovative way of constructing their walls because this showed that they understood gravity and the physics of the rocks, the way that the rocks were placed on each other. And so here it's interesting to see their flat edges and their shapes holding themselves together without any sealant. So this really, really encapsulates the way that they understood friction and the physics along with building. So their city placements were like machines. They were built so that they primarily faced the west, but also some cities were found to face east. This was because this was highly dependent on like which types of crops they wanted to grow. So if they wanted to face the west, this was because they wanted to maximize the amount of moisture, and then if they wanted to face east, they wanted to maximize the amount of sun. And so this would allow them to receive more sunlight for the crops, and also highly dependent on the moon cycles. So here, in their architecture, it displays their understanding of astronomy, which is incredibly mind-blowing. Okay, and here are some more pictures of Machu Picchu. So the picture on the left is Machu Picchu, and this is the kind of the houses, the military architecture, and the storage units, so that what they would use to store like their corn, their potatoes, all their food. And so it's interesting to see how different shapes and sizes, and also the different amount of windows in each building are used for different things. So they affect the way that they conserve their food, and it affects the way that they conserve their weapons also. And then here on the right is also just a better picture to see the sort of like the amount of precision that they would use when constructing their buildings. And again, these are not held together by any type of cement, it's just the rocks. So, and it kind of just looks like they were just mushed together. That's how well they were able to carve and sort of like just like seal them together in a way. All right, and that's all I have for you. Thank you.